Hello and welcome. Happy Friday. We're glad you're able to join us today. The Women's Caucus has planned a great webinar for you. Laura from our Women's Caucus will be our moderator today, and she will introduce our guest speakers. We encourage you to participate in the conversation, so you can use the chat feature and the Q&A feature to ask questions and to collaborate. You can ask your questions at any time. You can ask anonymously, and there will be plenty of time for the Q&A. This webinar is recorded, so please feel free to share the recording with your colleagues. And if you would like to turn on closed captions, you can do so by going to the bottom panel of Zoom. And now, with any further ado, I would like to hand it over to Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you very much, Belma. I'm Laura Remillard, and I'm a program manager at the School of Medicine at Stanford University, and I have been with the Women's Caucus since its formation. And I'm so excited to introduce you to two amazing women. We have here Nancy Lurker, who is an executive chair and board director of iPoint Pharmaceuticals. And she is also an external board member for the Master in Science program in Translational Research and Applied Medicine at Stanford School of Medicine. And we also have Hilda Scharen-Guivel, who is currently serving on the board of a public company and a nonprofit hospital board and advising startups at the University of South Florida. And we're just going to go right into this, and I have a list of questions, and I am going to start right now. The first question we have here is, what inspired you to pursue a leadership role in your field, and was there a particular role model?
Well, thank you, Laura. I'll start. I'm Nancy Lurker, and it's very nice to be here with you all, especially on a Good Friday. So thank you for taking the time. When I look back on this, I think some of it for me was just my temperament. It wasn't so much a person as it was my temperament. And I came of age in the 70s and 80s when women were really being told, you can do this. And that really had a significant impact on me. And so between a combination of just my drive as a person and the fact that women everywhere were really being told, go forge a path for yourself, that's what really inspired me. And so I wanted to be part of that. So Hilda, why don't you comment?
Sure. Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with all of you this afternoon. And so for me, I have to actually start from the very beginning and, tell you a little bit about myself. And so I'm a first generation American. And so, my background, getting into the STEM field, I really owe it to my parents. So my father, who had obtained a PhD in nuclear physics from Cambridge, he came to the US in the mid-60s in what was called the brain drain. And so for those of you who don't know, that was an exodus of British talent, particularly in the fields of academia and scientific fields and technical sectors, to the US. And so my mother, who was French and had an advanced degree in English. Growing up, languages came really easily to me, but I loved math. And so it was really complicated. What am I going to study? And both of my parents encouraged me to get into the field of science and STEM, and I studied engineering. And I really owe it to them because they felt like this was the only way that I was going to get a job, a well-paying job, and a job guarantee as well. And so, leadership role in STEM to me was also a way to make a difference. I was very excited to kind of like help pave the way. At the time, there weren't like that many women in the engineering field. And, I was very passionate about that. And I'm so excited that I was able to study engineering, and it opened so many doors for me.
Well, thank you so much. the next question is, can you share some of the key challenges you faced as a female leader and how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah, let me say it's interesting. I am somebody who I don't hold on to grudges or bad feelings. It's just something I've never done my whole life. And so if you would have asked me 3 years ago this question, I would have said, well, I have to really, really think about it. And in many ways, I had wonderful mentors, which I did. Wonderful male mentors who really made an effort to make sure me and other females were moving up in these organizations. Until I actually moved during the pandemic, and I had to go through 22 years of stuff in my home. And I was going through one of the boxes, I found a journal from when I was a senior director, product director. And so I was just starting to have people report into me. And I was, it all came flooding back. I was horrified. This journal of what I had written that I was dealing with. Maybe it was subconscious. I wanted to forget it. But things like my boss's boss calling me into his office and we were having a meeting and then literally interrupting me. And I wrote all this down and telling me that the only reason I got promoted was because I was a pretty blonde woman, quote unquote. And then I was also reading where, the guys would go out and they would give me a hard time because I would try to go with them. And, they were always doing raunchy things. And then they would make fun of me when I would go with them. So, and I could give other examples. And I know, first of all, I did oftentimes go home and talk to my husband, and whether you have a partner or you need somebody you can talk to. You need to, first of all, get clarity for, am I crazy? Is this me? Which too many times women self-criticize. So you have to force yourself to go, this is not me. I'm not, in a house of mirrors. And get somebody you can bounce, someone you can talk to. So I had a combination of other girlfriends in the business work world, as well as my husband. And then, honestly, when needed, I went to HR, not to report people, but to say, help me figure out what to do. So always get somebody that can help you sort through these things. It can really help you see things with more clarity.
So Nancy, I
Please,
completely
yes.
agree with you. I mean, I think that's really, really key, is to surround yourself with people that are kind of a sounding board. And so what I'd like to do is kind of share with you a little bit my journey. And I wasn't quite as organized as Nancy with a journal, but when I started working, it was definitely a male environment in engineering. And I had managers. They were both men and women, and some supportive, but others not so much. So I was always focused on really just getting the job done, and whatever that meant. And so in my early years, that meant really trying to fit in, trying to kind of emulate what my male colleagues were doing. And I have to tell you, it didn't really feel quite right, quite authentic, because it really wasn't who I was. And I was so self-conscious about how I was perceived. And so I was always questioning myself. But, over time, I did become more authentic to who I was as a person, a leader, a female. And, this was only possible really because I had taken on some more leadership roles in positions. I was kind of driving teams and strategies. And so I have to say the issues that I was facing were really people issues. Someone telling you, no, you can't do it like that. It can't be done this way. Or why do you want to do it that way? And I was, again, just wanted to get the job done. So, as an engineer and a problem solver, I mean, that was all I needed to hear, and to be challenged and prove them wrong. And so I would kind of find ways, and I know, Nancy, you did the same thing as well, to kind of maneuver around these no-sayers to get the job done.
Thank you so much. Belma, if I could just interrupt here, if you can take it to the next slide, then our audience can take a look at some of the data that we have while I ask the next question here. How do you approach work-life balance, and do you have any advice for achieving it in a leadership position? Work-life balance.
I think that is a very important question. I have two daughters, and look, I always made, partly because I had a psychologically absent mother, and I swore I would never treat my girls that way. Not that I didn't love my mother, I did, but she was unfortunately a classic 1950s depressed housewife. And so what I got good at doing, but it takes practice, you're not going to be perfect at this, is you need to compartmentalize. And what you need to do is you've got to be able, when you're with your friends or your family, or you're doing something that's valuable to you, not work related, you've got to block work out and be in the moment with whatever it is that you're doing. In that case, for me, it was spending time with my daughters and making sure that I really carved time out for them, and then and didn't let work impede. So I wasn't perfect, but I really made an effort that, you know, I didn't have the computer sitting on the kitchen counter. When I was home, I left it there until, you know, we always sat down and had a family dinner, and I would make sure I spent reading them a book, getting them to bed, and then I would go back to my job. So I really made a discipline. The other thing I did is, at one point in my career, you know, I went on the slow track. I just decided my girls were, you know, now in school age, and I couldn't do all the travel and be gone. I felt, you know, I wanted to be there for them. So I actually ended up taking a job that did not require as much travel. It was actually a CEO position, but it was with a company that was struggling. And even though I knew that I really should leave, and because the company was, the founder did not want to listen to me. But I thought, you know what? He and I had a good relationship. And I thought, you know what? Even though this company is going to continue to struggle, and there was a lot of external factors for that, I'm going to stay. And I did that for 7 years because it allowed me not to have to travel and work as hard. Then I went back into a much more, you know, travel heavy and demanding role after that. Did I suffer from that career-wise? Maybe a little bit, but that's okay. That's okay.
Very good.
I love how disciplined you are, Nancy, and I actually will probably share with you more so, you know, my struggles with that. I think that I'll share with you actually an example at a point in my time where I was actually prioritizing work over family. And so at the time I had my son was 3 years old, and I worked in the field of emergency response, which meant, you know, long hours and unpredictable schedules. And, you know, I spent weekends working, being called at any point in time to handle national security emergencies. And I really had delegated most of the upbringing of my son at that time to my parents. And it was a very, very stressful time. And I really didn't know what work-life balance was, really. I was just working and wanted to get ahead. And at the time, I mean, some of you may not even know, but we used to have these pagers. And so I had a cell phone and a pager, and all those things would just go off at once. And, you know, I couldn't even plan my weekends, you know, and because I was called in to handle these national security issues. And so I remember over time, you know, this went on for a couple of years, but I remember just having these dreams at night of just ripping all these devices and throwing them away. And so, you know, I think that what happened is I really kind of learned over time that I was really stressed and anxious, and I needed to make a change. I needed to be there for my son. And, you know, I quickly recognized that there was this real disconnect in me. And so I needed to make a career change. And it was just wonderful, you know, when I was able to have a little more predictability in my schedule. And I think it's, again, I mentioned this earlier in some of the previous responses. It's really important to kind of be authentic to who you are. Listen to yourself, listen to your intuition. And this work-life balance, it really is a personal thing. And, the choices I made back then, it really helped my career. I mean, I hate to say it. It was a choice at the time that I made. And then when I realized this was kind of beyond what were my acceptable boundaries, I made a change and I prioritized what was important to me at that point in time.
Wow, I'm just so intrigued by both of your stories, and I'm sure that that really resonates with, I know it resonates with me and Sarah, who's also working moms, and the working moms in the audience as well. What strategies have you found effective for building a diverse and inclusive team?
Well, first of all, you hire diverse people. So I worked hard at that. And, it's hard in STEM because there's not as many women or people of color in STEM. And that's a whole nother topic we could get into as to why that is. But I think you have to really make that extra effort. And one of the things, I told my head of HR, who's worked with me through multiple companies, I said, look, we've got to go out. We can't just keep using the typical recruiting resources. So let's tap into, in our case, it was some African Americans. I want to go talk to them and find out where are their resources? How do we break into their network so that we could bring more people of color into the organization? So we made a concerted effort to make that happen. And then, you know what? Look, it's just, you have to lead by example. You just do. I told the chairman of our board, who, by the way, is Swedish, and the Swedes are very egalitarian. And I said, Jorn, we have myself and one other woman on the board. And most people might say that that's good enough. I hope I didn't black out there. My computer just went into low power mode. But I said, I want a third woman or a person of color on this board. And he agreed, but you have to advocate. That's the only way you can do it. You have to advocate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. You really are a true advocate. So I think that, I wanted to kind of touch on a couple other things. I mean, I think it's really important to have these diverse groups. It helps make better decisions for the group. And but it can be challenging at times. And I think that, having these different and divergent perspectives, it can make it really difficult to kind of lead a team. And I think really the best way to kind of get your team to be functioning well and with these different perspectives is to really understand the people that are sitting around the table there, the people that are part of your team. Do they just want to be heard, and do they always want to be right? Do they have an ulterior motive? Are they trying to take over your job? So I can't tell you how many times, like in my career, where I just kind of assumed, oh, this person, and I think, that's when it's really important to kind of have those conversations with those people, not in the meeting, obviously, like outside the meeting, understand what is their motivation. And, don't be afraid to have these difficult conversations, just to understand where they're coming from, because it really helped me, build these more cohesive teams.
Excellent. That's
Laura, ask the next question to Hilda. I have to just step away to get a charger for my iPad.
sure.
I thought I had plenty of charge.
I sure will. Can you describe a particularly rewarding or impactful leadership moment in your career?
Okay, thank you. That's an excellent question. And so I have to give you 3 examples in my career. So as an engineer, I was also in what was called the United States Public Health Service. I served my country for 27 years. And we had a promotion system that was very similar to the Navy. The ranks are similar. And so I was actually one of the first females in that engineering category to get a promotion. And I actually received an early promotion to captain. And so that was really, really rewarding to me. And the second example I have is there was a position, there were several positions that were created at the Food and Drug Administration where I was, and it was a position that was supposed to be across the different areas of medical device review. So in medical device review, you have pre-market, post-market, you have compliance, and you have the science end. And this was a position where it was kind of cutting across all those different areas of review. And it was a position called a network leader. And I really didn't think I was qualified for that position. And so I was actually even just questioning myself, should I even apply? And, I was encouraged by some of the people around me, you should apply. And I applied and, and then when I actually got the position, I was scared. I wasn't sure, am I going to be able to do this? And then, you learn, you just rise to the challenge. And it opened up so many more senior leadership positions for me, just doing it. And I felt like I was taking this huge step. And so that was just very rewarding. So I think, the key here is like, don't question yourself, just go for it and do it. And then you'll be surprised. You'll be like, wow, I can do this. Nancy?
Yeah, you know what? I want to echo that. Probably that's the biggest thing I still see with women even today. And unfortunately, even in my daughters, is they second guess themselves. At most times, not all the time, but most times when I interview guys and even in this case, I don't think it matters whether you're even a different race or ethnicity. I find very much a male-female divide. Males tend to say, yeah, you know what? I got this opportunity. Sure. Women will say, I'm not sure if I'm ready. And what I can say is, again, be willing to take risk, be confident in yourself. When you're given opportunities, go for it. Because obviously, if you're given an opportunity or someone suggests it to you, they're doing it because they see the qualities in you that mean you can lead. So don't second guess yourself. Of course, it's scary. As Hilda said, you put yourself in these roles, and I did too. I've been in them where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure if I can do this. But you know what? If you're just dedicated and you have people you can go to for advice and help, you'll do great. So I always tell people, go for a promotion or a different job that's more complex when you're 75% ready, not 90% ready, not 100% ready, 75% ready.
I love that. I love that. And I'm sorry, I just have to interject. I just had this conversation with my daughter within the last week because she was
very interesting.
Yes, position, but she said, I'm not qualified for it. And I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know that, and just what you said about how men will just, I'm going to apply for that role, and women will, no, I don't quite fit all of the categories. And so,
right.
Nancy, just a kind of a PS to the question, can you think back to an impactful leadership moment in your career? Like an aha moment, perhaps?
Well, yeah, I can tell you one for me. And I think this was, again, somewhat a function of my generation. Because I didn't grow up playing team sports. Title IX didn't come into effect till I was about a sophomore in high school. And as you know, it took a number of years for it to really kick in where women played sports a lot. So I didn't realize I was already a vice president, and I was probably too anxious at this point to get ahead. And when there was an executive presentation to the CEO and the executive committee, my team came up and presented, and I thought, well, I should act like one of them, not the team, one of the executive committee members. And I started asking my team questions in front of them instead of wait a minute, I'm like the captain of the football team here or the captain of the tennis team. I need to support them and help them. And it was after that, somebody came up to me and pulled me aside and said to me, you got to think like you're the team player. You're the team lead here. And you're not. You're acting like you're on the other side, sort of critiquing them. And it's coming across like you're throwing them under the bus. And all of a sudden, I got so embarrassed. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, of course, it was a major aha for me that when you have your team, you need to be the leader. And anytime they're in front of any type of senior manager, you support them. You never, ever critique them in front or question them in front. In fact, if anything, you run interference. I've never forgotten that. And I would say now, I think I'm actually quite good at that. But boy, did I have to learn that lesson.
Oh, wow. I'm listening so carefully here because I'm sitting here learning from both of you and I love it. I love it. I love this conversation. Um, the next question I have is, what leadership qualities do you believe are especially important for women in leadership roles? You sort of touched on it, but let's expound on that.
Hilda, go ahead. You take that one first.
Sure. So I don't know if there's so much like qualities and things like that, but I would say that again, it's believing in yourself, being authentic, knowing what you stand for, and persevering for where you want to be, what you want to do, what excites you. And probably the most important one is learning to say no.
You want to expand on that, Hilda?
No, not really. I mean, I think it means it kind of goes with, being authentic, knowing what you stand for.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah. On my side, I would say, let me talk about just what I have found to be some of the most important leadership lessons in general, and then a little bit just for women in particular. And that is, you need to high integrity. You need to make sure that and I still see this today, male or female, but this one I tend to see more in men, where they make it about them. Don't ever make the job about you. It is not about you. It's about your team. And you need to feel confident hiring A players or very talented people who could potentially even take your job. Because if you don't do that, you're never going to get your organization to the level of performance that you want it to be. You have to have everybody rowing in that boat the same. And you need to be willing to roll up your sleeves and dig in with them. I'll give you one example. I think sometimes it's anecdotes is the best example. Just, everybody has different personality characteristics. And I'm by nature, I find it easy to delegate because I'm not a detailed person. But a woman I hired, extremely talented, very much a detailed oriented person, which is good, right? You want that with other people around you. The problem was she didn't know when to let go. And so what would happen is the work product that would be turned into her by her subordinates was never good enough for her. And so she would stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning and redo a lot of it. Oh. And what she put together was phenomenal. And this was obviously, it's in biotech. So, a lot of it, very scientific, very complicated stuff. But talk about demoralizing to her team members. And so what happened is people would quit because it was like they were never good enough for her. And so you have to learn how to delegate. And by the way, that'll make your life easier at home as well, give you more work-life balance. But you have to know when to delegate and never take over your team members' work. Just send stuff back with suggestions. Always give positive feedback first, then give some suggestions on maybe where they could tweak things. So that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned is learn how to delegate, hire a strong team, make sure you are in the boat with them, And only at certain times should you ever have to say you're the boss or that you're in charge or make a decision that overrides them. Don't ever feel like you have to throw your weight around. What was it? I think it was Roosevelt who said, speak softly, but carry a big stick. So it was, you don't have to, people know you're the boss. You don't have to tell them. What they love is that if you roll up your sleeves and you're in the trenches with them, until at times you do need to lead.
So
So
Nancy,
if I could just add one
Yeah,
thing,
please,
Nancy,
please.
I wish I had listened to what you were saying before. I had to, of course, learn the hard way. And I was actually in a position where I had some people, some subordinates who were not rising up to the occasion. And I ended up kind of like taking over several people's job.
Mm.
Complete burnout, awful.
It happens.
And I was miserable. I think I think really, again, it was kind of like to what you were saying, Nancy. My family was like, this is not working.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
And then what I learned, and I think you touched on that, Nancy, I kind of also learned just how important it is to believe in your people and encourage them. And then I became, more of a cheerleader for the people that were on my teams.
Yeah.
And definitely made my life like a lot easier. And I think I was much more pleasant to be around at home.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah,
So,
and you know what? It's also that if you've got look, your job isn't to do somebody else's job if they're not performing. Your job is to give them the feedback and then give them the proper performance review. And if they can't, give them time to improve. But if ultimately they can't improve, then they're not a fit for that job. They need to get moved out. So yes, good points, Hilda.
Nancy, I'm curious, your anecdote about the one employee you had who would stay up till late to do those perfect projects. What kind of feedback did you give her, or did you give her any feedback?
Oh, I did. And, look, unfortunately, she hit what I would call a Peter principle. I think she wanted to be a CEO at one point, but she never could make it because of that. And I gave her feedback about it. And by the way, her prior boss, we had all worked together at another company, had also given her the feedback, and she can't hear it. She could never hear it. And so what happened was she just got angry. And ultimately, she quit. You don't even want to know what happened. It was just a horrible blow up at the board meeting. She came in and made these pronouncements in front of the board. I mean, the board was horrified. I've never been through anything like that before. So some people can't psychologically handle any kind of feedback that way. So she had some personality issues going on as well. But normally you want to give that feedback and you want to make sure it's documented. It doesn't have to be one of you or else you're going to lose your job. It's more, listen, I'm here to help you. Here's what you need to work on. And then at the right time, if it's not improving, put it in the performance review. And then start to, if it's still not working, either get them moved into another role. That's always preferable. And ultimately the worst is if they, that they have to leave the company.
So that's really a good point. I mean, it wasn't on the list of questions, but you both are leaders and you've both had to have difficult conversations with your employees. And some people find that very challenging. So I appreciate your input there. Hilda, you're more than welcome to comment if you'd like. I know this is off the cuff here. So but
that's all right.
Yeah, chime in if you'd like, Hilda.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add. I think Nancy covered that nicely.
Yeah, very good. The next question is actually related to what we were just talking about. What advice, we talked about earlier, what advice would you give to young women aspiring to become leaders in their respective fields? What advice?
First of all, find some people who can coach you. I don't even like to use mentor because I think it can intimidate people. Find people who are more senior to you that you can use as confidence and talk through on things and get perspective. We all need perspective. That's number one. Number two, set clear goals and communicate those to your boss and, if appropriate, HR. So at the right time, probably during your performance review, tell them what you want. I would like to be, promoted to this position in whatever it is, 1 year, 2 years. Here's my goals. Is that feasible? And what do I need to do to hit that? Because one of the big things I find, again, is that sometimes women are afraid to put that stake in the ground. And what happens is, because here's what happens. When you're a senior level leader like myself, and even with HR, when a senior position opens up, you start going through, okay, who could fill this role? Who's qualified? If you haven't spoken up, oftentimes you won't get on the radar and you won't get on the list. So you have to learn, you've got to put some stakes in the ground. I mentor a fair number of people, and I've continued to over the years. And one of the things I find is that sometimes I'll ask them, well, what are your goals in the next 3 to 5 years? And I get, well, I'm not sure, maybe I want to do this, but I got this going on over here. And it's this wishy-washy, and that's okay if you don't want to get ahead. And by the way, it's not for everybody. So I'm not advocating that. Some people want to just stay at a certain level. They've got family issues. They're not that's fine. Mm-hmm. But if you do, as you said, Laura, if you do really want to get ahead and you want to be in a leadership position, you have to put a stake in the ground and make choices. Because if you don't make choices, then you're never going to be in a position to be on that list when the opportunities come.
And the choices will be made for you, right?
And the choices will be made for you. That's right. Thank you, Hilda. That's exactly right.
And if I could just add, I think, touching on more so, learning about what's important to you, what really drives you, what are you passionate about, and, believe in yourself. And I think we've touched on this many, many times, and I call it find your people, your cheerleaders, the people that are there, that have your back, that you're sharing with them what you want to do. And, tap into that. I think that is so important. That is part of your strength, because, especially when you're doubting yourself. And we touched on that earlier as well.
I think your cheerleaders, I love that term, because there was a time when I was unemployed and but I had networked with the folks at ACRO, this organization who's hosting this webinar, and they were my cheerleaders. They were the ones who were rooting for me and sending me messages. Laura, you're awesome. You're great. Here's a job posting, check that out. And it was like, wow, I was so happy to have this network and this group, this cheerleader. And so, I think that's awesome. Having that. That's why it's important to network as well.
Yes, it is.
Very
important. And I think, Laura, you just bring up like a really good point, because I think that those cheerleaders, they may not be in your workplace. They could be completely outside. And I remember actually a point in my career when I had this job, and it was just, I had a horrible boss. And, there was nothing I would do that would be right. And, I remember just being so miserable, but I was part of an organization, and I was responsible for collecting information related to the historical chief engineers. And that was so rewarding. It was like, wow. And then, through that organization also, I networked, and that's how I found my next job, my exit. And I think we've all been in positions where it's just, it doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to work. It's a personality conflict.
And I was going to say, don't burn your bridges either, because you don't want to leave. You always want to be professional and positive.
Yes.
Because you never know when you're going to need these people. And I'm sorry, I keep interjecting these thoughts.
No, that's a great point.
But years ago, I was going through a divorce, and to make extra money, I became a substitute teacher. Well, all because I was involved in the PTA and I knew everybody from elementary to high school, the teachers, they all hired me. They all wanted me. And then I got into long-term subbings. And then one thing led to another. And I started working at the high school because everybody knew me. All the moms knew me. The principals knew me. So, you know, you never know where one thing's going to lead to another. So don't burn your bridges because you may need those people sometime in the future.
I want
Um,
to second that. Even if you are frustrated, whatever it is, you might think this is the worst company ever. I hate my boss, whatever. Leave on a good note.
Exactly. Somebody wrote in here, curious about the best approaches for networking.
Well, I'll jump in on that one.
Yeah.
And I've taught my daughters this. Just simply stay in touch with people.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't stay in touch with everybody, but I make an effort to, like, I'll give you an example. I get a daily feed of I sit on a number of boards and then companies I've been at in the past. And I went into Google and I've got alerts set up for all of them. And so not every day, but most days, a bunch of alerts come in. And if there's an interesting article about that company, I forward it on to the people I know at that company, as one or two of the people I know that I might be close to. Just the biggest thing for networking is, because it can't, again, I hate it. It can make you think like I got to go to a cocktail party where I don't know anybody and I have to try to make conversations. And it's intimidating. You don't have to do that. It's like right now, right? Just stay in touch with Laura, stay in touch with people. Just once in a while, send a quick text or an email and say, hey, how are you doing? Can we go have a cocktail? Can we go have a cup of coffee? All those things. Like when I go to a city, I have a list of people I know, and I will, if I'm up to it, sometimes I just want to chill, but sometimes I will contact people in that city and say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Are you free for dinner or breakfast, whatever? It's just building that out over time. And you'd be surprised. It's like a avalanche. It starts to snowball as you get to know more and more and more people through your life.
So I like the analogy of avalanche. I was thinking more in terms of like a network, like a spider web that just grows, but that works too. And you have to be patient, and you have to take that first step.
Yeah.
I mean, you meet someone and you never know. You never know. You meet someone who then introduces you to somebody. That's how I got my seat on the first public company board. It was a person who introduced me to somebody else, and we connected. We met over lunch, and then established a relationship. And you do have to maintain those relationships and kind of check in periodically, as well, as Nancy said.
And so that's a really good point, because we may have perhaps younger employees, or perhaps others with personalities where they're not an extrovert, they're more introverted, and they don't know how to take that first step. I mean, I'm like both of you. I can go into a room, and if I don't know somebody, I'll go up to them and introduce myself. And I like networking. I like making connections. And I've done that. If somebody needs something, oh, let me find out who I can get to help you with that. And I'll just go for it. So, but some people need to learn how to do that. And I'm going to touch on that in our closing statements. But I do want to be mindful of the time and see if anybody has any questions. I don't see anything in the question, the Q&A, but I'm asking our audience, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking because there's so much to say. I have another question here. How do you stay current and adapt to changes in your industry field?
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. Let me just say something. The latest one, of course, is artificial intelligence. So, because by the way, I'm 66. As you get older, you're not as much in the stream. And by the way, I'm not now in a day-to-day job where you have to learn some of these things, and resources will be thrown at you where you can get access to things. So like on artificial intelligence, I just signed up. I do like X, formerly known as Twitter, and I just signed up for a couple people who are experts in AI. I want to sign up on LinkedIn through some courses on AI. There are some lectures I've attended on artificial intelligence. So what you need to do is, it's not, given the internet these days, it's not hard to find the resources online for free that you can get up to date on. And by the way, I've become such a huge fan of ChatGPT. So if there is something I want to know, I will go right to ChatGPT and say, explain to me as a scientist, or explain to me as a technological leader, where can I find resources around this? Or what are the key things I need to know about this? It's amazing what that thing will spit out for you. So just make sure you do, if you don't know something, immediately go online. You can find those resources and sort of self-discipline yourself to get a little educated about it.
Right.
Yeah, and if I could just add, I absolutely agree with what you're saying, Nancy. I think that when you have kind of like a project or a task at hand, I think it's also important to kind of read a lot around that topic to kind of understand everything around it, and not just the job you're doing. And I mean, I see that, those that kind of do their own little research in understanding all the external factors around things, it kind of really helps you better understand and better kind of build your solution or what you're working on.
Exactly. Exactly. So those are the questions I have. Nancy and Hilda, if there are any additional comments you want to make, or
Yeah, the biggest thing I want to say, look, we all go through ups and downs in our careers and in our work life. And, again, I'm going to give another example. My son-in-law, he has his first high pressure job out of college. He actually went into the Army as an infantryman, and then he went out and went to college on the GI Bill. And so he's actually older. He's 27. He got his job when he was 26. And this is his first job out of college. And he's got a bad boss. And I told him, what I want to say to you is this: don't despair. Don't give up. Don't feel like, and I don't care if it's your first job or you're halfway in your career. Look, we all go through ups and downs, and you're going to run into bad bosses. You're going to run into companies or institutions that are not a good fit, or a role that's not a good fit. That's okay. And be patient with yourself. I'd like to give yourself grace and patience that you can get through it, and give yourself time. But don't beat yourself up. Go to people who give you positive reinforcement, and talk to, again, your friends and family and others, where you get that positive reinforcement. And if you're stuck for a while, do the best you can to manage that situation. I would also say stick up for yourself. If needed, you need to stick up to your boss if it's a bad situation, but never, ever let yourself get where you feel like you're getting psychologically drowned or out, because there's always hope at the end of the rainbow that better things will come along. And for my son-in-law, I told him, look, Joseph, you need to just hang in here for a year. And it's been a year. And I said, because I know the guy, he's just a great guy. He works hard, always has a smile on his face, gets the job done. And I said, just give yourself time, you'll shine. And sure enough, we're a year in, and he's probably got a new opportunity internally in this company coming his way in the next couple of months. But boy, did he go through the ups and downs. So just be patient with yourself, get the people who support you, and rely on them, and don't let yourself get down.
Yeah, and it's really difficult, like when you're actually in the situation. I mean, when you look back, you're like, wow, that wasn't quite as bad, but you're in it because there's really kind of no exit. You're not seeing kind of
Yes.
the light, but and you know, to keep that in perspective, Nancy, I think that's very, very helpful. I wanted to touch just maybe on one more thing, and I think, you know, we talked about having your cheerleaders, I think it's also important, you know, for you to be the cheerleader. Okay. I mean, I
Yeah,
think
that's a
we
very
have
good
a
point.
responsibility to really help others, help other women that are coming up through the ranks, you know, support them, share with them, you know, your pearls of wisdom. And, you know, I think that's really kind of like the only way that we're going to kind of keep kind of like this how would I say, advance the equality of women, and you know, as we're kind of completing Women's History Month. And I just wanted to kind of challenge you and charge you with that responsibility. We all have a responsibility here to help the future generation of leaders.
Yeah. Very good point, Hilda.
Very good. Thank you so
Excellent point.
much. I wish we can go on and on because this is so great. And I love the flow of this exchange, you know, how, you know, just the fact that you both have so much experience and you can provide all of these pearls, you know, to the audience. I think it's awesome. So we're kind of wrapping up here. Belma is going to go to the next slide here. I wanted to comment on our next webinar, which is going to take place at the end of April, and it's called I Am Remarkable, and it's a Google initiative, and I'm an official facilitator for that. And it started off, if you're not familiar with it, it started off being just for women, but now it's open to anybody, underrepresented communities, or perhaps people based on their upbringing, their culture, religion, where they weren't taught to advocate for themselves. And the information in this workshop is so amazing because first of all, there's data that comes from researchers at Google who provide all of this. And there's participation from the audience. And so this is slated for April 23rd. And you can find the information on the APRA website. And if you have any questions about that particular webinar or even today's webinar, my email address is right here, laura5@stanford.edu. I am just, like I said, I was so happy to be a part of this conversation with Nancy and Hilda. And we have Sarah, who is the outgoing chair of the Women's Caucus here. Sarah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're more than welcome to say a few words.
Thank you, everyone who was able to join us today. Thank you especially for being here for Women's History Month as we wrap this up. And thank you to Nancy and Hilda for being here today. We greatly appreciate your insights. And hopefully anyone who was not able to join us live will be able to pick up the recorded session later, posted to the ACRA website. So thank you, Laura, for moderating as well. It's been great being the chair of the Women's Caucus, and I'll still be at the annual conference to facilitate that, but looking forward to see where the Women's Caucus goes next.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Laura,
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.